co-chairing this committee. It's crucially important to our profession and who we are, and I am delighted with the members of the panel that we have today, and I look forward to all of the great and right.
Oh, I think we missed the last bit of her message. She's just catching up some steam. All right, but it looks like we have around 28 participants, so I think we're good to go. Just as a reminder, this session is being recorded. So for future reference and your viewing pleasure, I'm sure we'll post it to the YouTube channel later. So thank you everyone for joining us for the last session of our Symposium Rising, Symposium for Climate and Equity. We're really excited, a bit bittersweet. It's been a lot of work putting this together, but we've had a blast, and we're very passionate about these topics, and we are also equally excited about the panelists that we have today. We want to mention that Rising is presented by Woodworks, Wood Products Council, and we'll hear about them later. Special thank you to our sponsors, our level 1 sponsors, Nano Architecture and Huseman and Associates Consulting Engineers. And thank you to our break sponsors, Woodworks and SQWS Ripple. And as we did the session prior, we wanted to congratulate all the Louisiana 2030 commitment signatory firms. Since the event started, we've had a couple of new signatories, and even since the last session, we had one more signatory, that's Goat Studio. So, round of applause to all the new signatories and all the firms and practitioners that have been signatories for the past. So this is our last day. We're calling it a unified front, and the ethos of this symposium has, talking about the levels and the scales of impact when we talk about sustainability, resiliency, and equity in the built environment. And if you've joined us for the duration of the symposium for all 4 sessions, you've hopefully you follow the thread that, we've wanted to, day one, we wanted to inform people and professionals about what they can do to better themselves as professionals and be champions of the message. Day 2 was about collaborating, signing up for the 2030 challenge and bringing this knowledge to your firm. Day 3 was about talking about addition and removal, erosion and deposition, poetically, but also as it happens in the city and how communities are affected unequally. Day 4, we're going to talk about how to bring all this into perspective and how buildings and architects can work with other professionals to be well-rounded interdisciplinary professionals, and foster a collaboration between all these different fields and see how the world of architecture fits globally. And if you're with us, if you're joining us today, this session is, you'll be receiving 2 HSW credits. So if you want to take a moment and screenshot the learning objectives for today, feel free to do so. And I want to introduce to you our panelists for today that we're so excited to hear about. We'll have presentations by them in a minute. So with us, we have Drew Lamb. Drew Lamb is a licensed interior designer with a Bachelor's of Interior Design from LSU in 2003. She worked with distinguished architecture firms such as SQWS Ripple and Gensler, and is currently the Louisiana Territory Manager for Herman Miller. Drew was appointed by the governor to sit on the Louisiana State Board of Interior Designers in 2012, and has been treasurer on that board for the last 3 years. She sat on the board of the Delta Regional Chapter of IIDA for 8 years, serving as president several times. She has been on the board of the USGBC Louisiana chapters 4 years and is currently the chair. Amanda Sesser. Amanda Sesser is a scientist and social ecological sustainability entrepreneur. She's the director of 21 Sustainability, which helps organizations, communities, and governments to better understand, manage, and adapt to social and ecological changes. Amanda specializes in involving stakeholders, decision makers, and scientists in processes to solve climate change challenges, as well as scientific translation and climate change communication. Amanda is the host of Climate Hot Seat, a climate adaptation podcast. We also have with us Camille Polan, and I've learned that since we've put this together, she's taken a different position, but you'll see why she has joined us today. So Camille was the former program manager at the City of New Orleans Office of Resiliency and Sustainability, where she implements the city's climate action strategy, which aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. She coordinates with other city departments, technical experts, and community partners on developing energy efficient solar, EV, charging, and other sustainability policies and programs. The Louisiana chapter of the U.S. Green Building Council named her as the 2018 Community Champion. She currently, or maybe not anymore, she served as the vice chair of the USGBC Louisiana chapter and is a member of the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network Steering Committee. Also with us is Scott Barrios. Scott Barrios is the Senior Account Manager for Entergy's Electric Technology program and is the lead strategist for electric mobility. In this role, Scott promotes the adoption of electric-powered alternatives and assists clients in finding solutions to meet their needs. Scott also serves on the executive board of directors for Louisiana Clean Fuels and is a member of the Environmental Affairs Committee with the Southwest Louisiana Economic Development Alliance. He was the recipient of the 2020 Carrie Martin Award, and his leadership and enthusiasm regarding alternative fuel transportation in Louisiana. Also with us have Jeffrey Canton. Jeffrey Canton is a longtime clean energy advocate and business owner, founder of Solar Alternatives and co-founder of EV Louisiana and EV Mississippi, organizations dedicated to informing the public on electric vehicle technology. Raised in New Orleans, Jeff received his Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Rice University in 1998. His career includes software architecture and electrical contracting in the US and the UK. In 2018, Jeff founded Solar Alternatives to bring clean energy technology to his home region and has contributed to over 25 million watts of solar energy development. And last but not least, we have Kevin Fitzwilliams. Kevin is the training and development specialist with the Energy Smart program, the energy efficiency program of Entergy in New Orleans. Kevin has a professional background in environmental education and residential solar energy consulting. In 2018, Kevin was selected as the inaugural One Hotels Fellow with E2 to promote community solar and on-bill financing of energy efficiency programs in Louisiana. He was also an instructor of the University of New Orleans Certificate in Sustainability. Kevin is a native of New Orleans and attended Loyola University, New Orleans, and Louisiana State University. So thank you to all our panelists. I'm very excited to see what they have to present to us today. And with that, we will start our day with Camille Polan. So please take it away, Camille.
Great. Thanks for inviting me. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've been asked to make it somewhat brief, so I know we have a lot of fantastic speakers. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so many of you know me from the City of New Orleans Office of Resilience and Sustainability. That's my former position. I'm currently with the City and County of Broomfield, Colorado, even though I'm not physically there yet. I'm working virtually and soon to be a Coloradan. So I'm coming to you live from Bayou St. John in New Orleans today. But I'm also connected to a lot of interesting resources in Colorado at the moment. So I'm happy to bring this presentation to you, talking a little bit about the culture of sustainability. And this is really meant to kick off some of the other topics that we'll be discussing in this panel. So this is a picture that should be familiar to quite a lot of you. And this is one of the things that has made this year so difficult for people living in the Gulf, on top of all of the other crises that we're dealing with. But this is what the reality was like in the Gulf of Mexico this year, the busiest hurricane season on record. And as you know, they ran out of letters and they had to go to the Greek alphabet because the threats were so dire in the Gulf. And this is the situation that we're trying to avoid by working on mitigation strategies to reduce greenhouse gases. And this is a screenshot from the City of New Orleans Climate Action Strategy. Some of you may have seen this before. In addition to the rising sea levels, we also have subsidence. And so subsidence, of course, means the ground is sinking beneath us while the seas are rising. And so this creates a challenge for coastal communities. And it means that we really have to think about resilience in a lot of different ways in terms of adaptation and mitigation. So the City of New Orleans set a goal to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. And that was based on a 2014 baseline greenhouse gas inventory. And the breakdown is here on the left of your screen. And you see that almost half of our emissions come from energy. And so that creates a huge opportunity for us in the building industry and for architects to think about how we can play a part in reducing that burden. So our per capita GHG emissions are not the worst. There's certainly cities that are doing far worse than us, but we do have the ability to really shift this if we look at electricity consumption, electricity generation, and of course, looking at the transportation sector as well. So if you've had a chance to read the climate action strategy, and I can put the link in the chat if you haven't. It's a great PDF document. It talks about specific strategies in energy, waste, transportation, and culture. And so culture seems like a strange one to throw in there, but really if we're thinking about it, this has to be a shift, not just of our economy, but our thinking. So the way we're interacting with energy. And we know that we don't have to throw a lot of political weight behind getting gas-fired plants to shut down. We know that a lot of them are shutting down on their own because they are shifting towards renewable energies. And so there's a lot of activities that are being pushed from the economic sector as well as the cultural sector. So we can think about how all of these interact with one another to create a greener future for New Orleans. And I'm just going to run through a couple of examples. One of the things that I worked on with many of you on this call was the NOLA Energy Challenge. And the NOLA Energy Challenge gets kind of at the heart of that culture issue, which is how do we get people aware of the energy that they're wasting? And this was a partnership that we did with the City of New Orleans and the Downtown Development District to get large commercial buildings, basically all the high rises in downtown New Orleans, to track and monitor their energy use. and we gave them prizes. We had different categories. We had council member banks came to a banquet and gave awards. So it was really an awareness raising project, as well as a way to get people engaged in the incentives that are available through Energy Smart and get free training on how to use the Energy Star tool. Another project that we hosted last year was the Women for Climate program. This was a mentorship program through the C40 International Cities Initiative. And the mayor launched this program last summer, and it allowed women that are either interested in sustainability or starting out their careers in sustainability to be paired with mentors who are more seasoned in the industry. And we had structured events throughout the year, and each mentee had to present a capstone project on one of these topics: waste, energy, or transportation, and the way that they would like to address these matters sustainably in New Orleans. It was a great way to build community and awareness. And here's another project that we worked on. This is the Climate Action Equity Project. This was led by the Greater New Orleans Foundation and the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. We took a deep dive look at how are we implementing the climate action strategy in an equitable way? Are we really meeting the needs of the community members who are most vulnerable to climate change? And so we went out in the community and asked them, how does energy impact you? What does it mean to your family when you can't pay your energy bill, or when the bus doesn't come on time, or you have to, you're late for work because there's no bus route near you? These everyday grassroots issues, and we issued a set of recommendations to the City Council. And then also, if you recall, the mayor this summer, she closed down certain streets to have bike-friendly corridors. And so this was a way to encourage social distancing, but of course also looking at ways to experiment with the use of public space and encourage bike riding and show how these models are viable. And of course, some of you may have heard about the models for the French Quarter, where we'd like to create pedestrian zones to allow for easier biking. And the last item that I wanted to mention is the C40 Mayor's Agenda for a Green and Just Recovery. These are conversations that Mayor Cantrell is having with her peers around the world. There's about a dozen mayors that are on this coalition who are talking about how is COVID going to present to us an opportunity to build back better? How does it allow us to create green jobs and to really target indoor air quality as an indicator of respiratory health? And how do we weave these themes together with equity and finance and ensure that we can create a green and just recovery from COVID? So with that, I just like to remind you that the reason we're doing all of this and the reason we're creating these solutions is for future generations and for our children. And this is why this work is so important to many of us. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Camille. That was really great. So up next, we have Scott Barrios from Entergy. So please take it away.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. So again, thank you, Javier. Thank you. I'm Scott Barrios. I'm Senior Account Manager for Entergy's Electric Technology Program, and I'm also our lead strategist for our newly formed electric mobility team. So I focus on trying to find electric powered solutions to meet any customer's needs, whether it's from industrial, agricultural, transportation, really where my focus is right now, and find the solutions and help remove the barriers to find ways we can help people plug into the benefits of going electric. So as may know, Entergy recognizes the challenges posed by climate change. Entergy has focused on this issue of sustainability for almost 2 decades now. We work to ensure that our concern about climate change translates into action. We have been a leader in limiting our greenhouse gases from our operations. As was discussed earlier, we're looking at ways we can remove fossil fuels from our generation mix. We invest in a lot in solar. In New Orleans East, we have the 1 megawatt solar plant with some other ones going on as well too, throughout the state as well, to help our generation mix. So we're looking at ways we can decrease our emissions there with our goal by 2030, reducing our CO2 emissions rate by 50% compared to what it was in 2000. And we also just released a few weeks ago as well a net zero goal by 2050 as well, which is going to take into consideration some great partnerships with Mitsubishi Power and looking at hydrogen storage in the future for that as well too. So we recognize that no sector can tackle this alone. We're looking at an economy-wide effort that's going to involve the industrial, agricultural, transportation sector to decarbonize the economy in our region. So electrification of the transportation sector is an important strategy for climate risk mitigations, and as the emissions for electric generating vehicle or electric using vehicles have lower emissions compared to their internal combustion engine counterparts. Many studies highlight that transportation electrification will be critical to achieving long-term greenhouse gas reduction goals. This presents an opportunity for Entergy to partner with regulators and other key stakeholders on policy incentive options to encourage the adoption of electric vehicles. So for this audience, we were discussing yesterday on a quick primer on electric vehicles as well too. There are numerous benefits to electric vehicles. One, users of electric vehicles have a reduced total cost of ownership. This is more prevalent specifically for fleet operations, where electric vehicles may have a higher upfront capital costs, but the total cost of ownership, because there's less maintenance, because electric motors have less moving parts and therefore require less maintenance. So cheaper maintenance cycles, increased uptime for the vehicles as well too, and plus electricity is a cheaper fuel versus gasoline, diesel, or other ones as well too. As well as what we're really here to talk about is reduce emissions with electric vehicles. Electricity, bottom line, is a better source of energy. EVs convert about 60% of the electricity from the grid to power that vehicle, where gasoline only uses about 20% of the energy stored in gasoline to move that vehicle forward. So again, 60% energy efficiency versus 20% energy efficiency. Really no argument there on what is the overall more energy efficient type of fuel. Even with no tailpipe emissions, it's important to factor in how electricity is generated when we're looking at emissions. All electric vehicles produce about 4,000 pounds of CO2 annually, and that's when we factor in how that we call well-to-wheel emissions, how that electricity is pulled out of the fuel for that electricity is removed from the ground, transported, used in the generation mix. So again, that's 4,000 pounds for CO2 annually for an electric vehicle, where an internal combustion engine, a gasoline vehicle, is producing about 11,000 pounds of CO2 annually. So you can see about a 7,000 pound decrease per vehicle of CO2 annually for electric vehicles. Now, Louisiana does rank 41st in the nation for electric vehicle adoptions, with roughly around, at the beginning of the year, around 2,500 electric vehicles totally registered total in the state, but that number is increasing. There's about, in the New Orleans metro area, there's about a little over 1,200 vehicles, electric vehicles registered, and that's with other big pockets in Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Lake Charles, Alexandria, and Shreveport as well too in the state. So also, it's important to mention that in the city of New Orleans, you have the Port of New Orleans and the New Orleans Sewage and Water Board are using electric vehicles in their fleet operations as well too. So we're seeing an increase of that as well. EV adoption is on the rise. A couple of the most popular models out there are going to be your Tesla models, the S3, X, and Y, also the Chevy Bolt, Nissan Leaf, and there's also in Louisiana, we have 3 electric buses on the road right now in Baton Rouge with Capital Area Transit System, and there are many other cars coming. There's more coming from Nissan, there's more coming from GM. you're seeing a lot of these large vehicle OEMs making goals. So GM, for example, by 2024, they're going to have 23 electric vehicles in their inventory in the United States. So that's pretty exciting. Ford Mustang Mach-E is coming out, the Volkswagen ID4, which really is probably going to be a tipping point for our region, is the adoption of trucks. Ford, GM, Tesla are all announcing trucks coming out in 2021, 22, 22, 23. Also, some startups such as Rivian, Nikola have some exciting new vehicles coming as well too. And when we start looking at the larger class vehicles, your class 4 and up, there's delivery vans, there's box trucks, long haul in the future. I'm involved right now with a project at Tulane in New Orleans, looking at 5 electric shuttle buses. We're working with the Department of Energy to test those out in the city, and to be as a test bed for how do we look at electrifying more public transportation options in the city as well too. Those will be up and running probably Q1 of 2022. So it's a long lead time for these types of projects as well too. It's important to note. And most EVs have a range of about 200 to 400 miles, which is adequate for most driving, because the Department of Energy says about 80% of all electric vehicle charging takes place at home. And this is really what's important for this group, is how are electric vehicles charged? How does that integrate into, whether it's design, into a building, into public spaces? How does that work? So, vehicles are charged either with AC or DC, and then it's different levels. You can categorize the type of charging, the charging speed, how long it takes to charge the vehicle, by 3 different levels. Level 1 charging, which is going to be used for a lot of residential folks. It's almost every electric vehicle on the market right now comes with a level 1 charger. And anywhere that you have a 120 volt outlet plug, you have a level 1 charger. I'm not joking. I just pulled this out of my trunk of my car right now. I'm a big show and tell type person. I can plug this into any standard 110 volt outlet at my house. I have what's called a J1772 connector on this, and I can plug that directly into my electric vehicle and charge my car anywhere. Now, the charging time for that is extremely low, though. So it's important to note that there, that those are made for charging at home. You don't need to go. It'll take me for a full electric vehicle. It takes probably about over 30, 40 hours to completely get a full charge on my car. The next step up is what you're seeing most people put into their houses, called a level 2 charger. It's working on 240 volts. I have a couple pictures up on the screen there. You're seeing these in public charges, multi-unit dwelling charging, residential charging. For example, the top left picture is a public level 2 charger in Lafayette, Louisiana library there. So public spaces, we worked with the designer up front that they put those chargers in, because it's easier if you can put them in from the design perspective, instead of having to go and break the concrete, run the conduit. So it's good to look in the future of ways we can put those into those public spaces. The multi-dwelling unit charging, that's in New Orleans. That's at a high-end apartment complex. They're looking at ways. Their idea was they want one electric vehicle charger for every space in their garage, perhaps. So again, and in the bottom is residential charging. That's what people putting at their houses, and that's another great example of New Orleans. These are 240 volts. You can charge a car from 0 to 100% in roughly about 10 to 12 hours, depending on the type of battery, depending on the type of car. There's a lot of factors into there, but this is what most people are looking at for either fleet operations, workplace charging, public charging, destination charger at hotels, shopping centers. This is what you're seeing around there. The next type of charging is a DC fast charger. DC fast chargers are 40 volt outputs, or 40 volts inputs. And these are the types of chargers you see along interstates. These are made for people who are commuting back and forth. In the city of New Orleans, there's only one. It's at the Rouse's on Barone down in the CBD. That's the only one in the city, but over in Slidell has a Tesla supercharger. In Hammond, they have an Electrify America charger. People who live there aren't going to these types of chargers. These are making for people who are driving through on the interstate, get a quick charge, can charge your car in 15, 20 minutes. Again, depends on the type of battery, depends on the type of car. A lot of factors in here, but really that's what we want to present real quick on some basics of electric vehicles. I can talk about electric vehicles all day long. It's a big passion of mine. But if you have any other questions, reach out to me. But what is Entergy doing in this space? You know, as we look at electricity being a primary fuel in the future for the transportation industry, how do we assist people in this area? So we have two programs we're looking at right now, and many more upcoming. The first is we have a rebate program. It's through the ETech program, Energy Technology program, where we provide rebates for customers who are putting in electric vehicle charging, whether it's a level 2 DC fast charger. It depends how much we pay. So most times for a level 2 charger, we're going to provide a $250 rebate. The cost of a level 2 charger is roughly $500 to $600, depending on the type of charger and depending on the use. Installation is another factor. I've seen some costs up to $20,000. I've seen some costs less than $1,000, $500 to put one in. So there's a lot of differentiating costs there. So that's the main point of that program. Provide rebates, provide incentives for looking at whether putting them into buildings, people's houses. That's what we're looking at there. The next program is specifically through Entergy New Orleans. In 2018, in our rate case with the city council there, we looked at two aspects. One was we're investing $500,000 in public EV charging with the city. This is going to equate to about 30 to 40 level 2 chargers in public spaces. So libraries, parks, public right-of-ways, available to the public on behalf of Entergy, working with the city. Roughly in 2021, early 2021, we're going to send out and try to crowdsource some of this information. We want to hear from the public where these types of chargers are going to go. And we don't want to necessarily hear from the people. We want to hear from the people who have EVs now, but we also want to look at the future. The future, as we know, more and more EV adoption is how do we address the concerns of people in the future. Also important, a part of that was our EVCI rider, which is a turnkey solution. Entergy owns and operates electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and we do on-bill billing to cover the cost. So again, we decrease the capital cost for customers. They don't have to pay out of pocket up front, and we just, Entergy owns that infrastructure, and over the course of 10 years, we recover that just through the normal energy billing. So that's a pretty exciting piece of what we're looking at for Entergy New Orleans. And in the future, we're looking at fleet options, more public charging. There's a lot of things we can do here, but we know we can't do this alone. We know there's numerous partners and organizations that we're looking at, advocacy groups such as our Clean Cities Coalitions in New Orleans. You have the part of the NOR, New Orleans Regional Planning Commission, the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuels Partnership. We work closely with them. We're working with vehicle charging OEMs, consulting research firms, our federal, state, and local government agencies to all make this happen. As you can tell, I'm very excited to talk about electric vehicles. I can do it all day long. We want to keep this short. My contact information is right there. I'm here to assist you if you have any questions on how electric vehicle works, how charging works. You can find me at the email address. You can find me on LinkedIn. So please let me know if you have any questions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for that. That was really great. So up next, we have Kevin Fitzwilliams. Kevin, whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Sure. So it looks like I just lost my PowerPoint. Give me 1 second. I'm pulling it up right now. But while I'm doing that, I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Kevin Fitzwilliams. I work with the Energy Smart program. And Energy Smart is the energy efficiency program through Entergy New Orleans. I have been working with the program for about a year and a half, coming on 2 years now. For those of you all who are familiar with Energy Smart, there may be some folks on the line who have submitted projects to us, so bear with me while I just give the primer for folks who are new. But Energy Smart is the energy efficiency program specifically in New Orleans with Entergy New Orleans. There is another program that is for Entergy Louisiana territory, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. That is the Entergy, that is called Entergy Solutions, and that is for Entergy Louisiana territory. So specifically for Entergy, for the Energy Smart program, it's a program that's been around now for 10 years. This is regulated by the City Council, and for that main difference between the two programs, Energy Smart in New Orleans and Entergy Solutions in the rest of the state for Entergy Louisiana territory, it is two separate programs, so it's two different pots of money that's available. And so Entergy Solutions is regulated by the Public Service Commission. But there is funding that's available in both programs. So this is a program that incentivizes businesses to become more energy efficient. And so as you can see here in this slide, we've the program, being that it is in its 10th year, it's had quite an impact. So hundreds of millions of kilowatt hours saved, and but we help several hundred businesses a year, and then thousands of homeowners a year to help save on their electric bill. The slide that you're seeing here is gives you an idea of what the caps are. So there are the total funding that's available is around $5 million per year in the city of New Orleans. A lot of the funding goes into retrofits of existing properties, the majority of the projects that come through. However, there are new construction incentives, and I will be talking about those. So the caps that you see here in the circles, $50,000 for lighting, $100,000 for non-lighting, and then a total of $150,000. This is available per Entergy account. And additionally, if you're talking about a large site that has multiple Entergy accounts, the entire cap that can be used for that one property would be $500,000 per year. These caps that you see actually do not apply for what's up at the top, new construction, and RCX standing for retro commissioning. So we'll get into those in just a second. So a lot of money that's available. And the great news is that, frankly, we are chasing projects. Our staff is hustling to get as many projects in the door as we can, because there is so much funding available, especially this year in COVID, that every project that comes through the door that's qualified gets funded. So if you're able to help any commercial property to become more energy efficient in the city of New Orleans, Energy Smart has money to help you do that. Some of the basics on how to submit a project to Energy Smart. I am one of the first people that you would speak to. So I'm someone who can help you feel confident and just comfortable with the process, and what is it that you're actually turning in? What is the Excel spreadsheet, and how to finagle that? And then in addition to me, you would be speaking with some engineers on staff that are reviewing the projects. But for every project that comes through the door, there's a simple process. We require some documentation. We require an Excel spreadsheet that has an application information, all the contact information, but explains what you're doing, whether it's a renovation, whether we're talking about building automation controls, or if it's a straight LED lighting retrofit or something like that, something very straightforward. But we're always going to need some other things like a proposal, a utility bill for the customer, and then any spec sheets for manufacturers. This process right here is what happens practically every day or several times a week for projects that are coming into the program, and it's how all these projects are funded. So basically, once this information is submitted to us, we give pre-approval once we review that project and have communication with what we call our trade allies, or the contractors, or the architects. And then once the pre-approval is granted and the work is done, whether it's an installation or whether it's improving the controls, whatever it is that's actually going to reduce the electricity usage, at that point, a completion notice is sent to us, and then the process for the paperwork gets started for that check to be cut. And that check can be cut and sent either to the customer or to the trade ally, depending on how that was set up. What you see here is just an example of the list of the many different incentives that are available, what we call our prescriptive incentives. So for those of you all who are new to the program, this is for something that would be a very straightforward process. We have what we call prescriptive measures that are dollar values that are already preset for each measure. So we have lighting, air conditioning, refrigeration, Other categories, we're concentrating a lot recently on air conditioning tune-ups. So we're always touting the fact that no matter what line of work you're in this field and helping buildings to reduce their electricity, we're always looking for all of these areas to be promoted. Our lighting contractors talk about air conditioning incentives, and that boosts the air conditioning companies. Our air conditioning companies do the same on the lighting side, making sure that they've switched out to LED as they're doing HVAC tune-ups. Building automation specialists are talking about retro commissioning and so on, and that just helps the entire program to grow. And speaking of growth, there has been a lot of growth in new construction. New construction is a program that was set up this year, just formally for the first time through the program. And we have had projects that have come through for the first time, which is terrific. And so the program provides incentives for new construction projects to implement energy efficient design and construction that goes beyond the baseline requirements by code. So customers can earn incentives for reducing electricity usage in the new building through energy efficiency. One key to this is that in order to qualify, the applications have to be submitted during the design phase of any new construction project. So there are what we call our prescriptive incentives that I just mentioned in new construction, but there's also incentives that you might be able to get a higher rate, which if you see here in interior and exterior lighting incentives, that if you can reduce the lighting power density by at least 10% by baseline, those incentives are paid at 35 cents a watt below the approved wattage baseline. There are custom incentives, which require a pre-approval, paid at 8 cents a kilowatt hour. There are whole building performance incentives, and that requires a building reduction in electrical usage by, again, at least 10% from the modeled and construction building relative to the base building. And those incentives are paid anywhere from 2 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And those are tiered depending on the length of the project, the time frame for getting that project in. So when we take a look at the actual process for submitting a new construction project, excuse me, from the initial contact that an architectural firm would have with Energy Smart and the program actually establishing the baseline through the approval and payment, this is a process that is fairly streamlined, but it starts with getting us involved in the design phase of any project. So our engineers would be in touch with you, making sure that the blueprints that we need are in our hands, so that we never come into a scenario that would be called free ridership, with the potential of or something happening too late in the game, for basically where we would have missed out on incentives. As long as we can show that the customer has chosen to become more energy efficient, has been influenced to do so because of the incentives, essentially having been shown two sets of plans, and one of them being incorporating the Energy Smart design or the energy efficient design, then these incentives would apply, and we can work with you on all the ways to make sure that that goes through. So you'd be able to include that in your proposal initially. For eligibility, you can see here that it's not just for ground up construction, it's also additions and expansions and gut rehabs that include whole building design, warm shell projects. We have incentives for every stage. If anything were not to fall under new construction, and it really ends up being a renovation of the building, then that would go through our what we call our typical process, which is 90% of the projects that come through being renovations. And then in addition to new construction, for those of you all who work at firms where retro commissioning is a part of the services that you guys offer, there are significant retro commissioning incentives, and that's a discussion that I could have with you all individually. There are two sets of incentives for the customer, and there's one incentive that goes to the service provider. That is a longer process that also at the end of it requires several months of measurement and verification. but Energy Smart is with you every step of the way. There are about 3 stages of check-in, and at each one of these, everyone between Energy Smart, the customer, and the service provider would all be on the same page. In order to participate in this, if you are involved in a retro commissioning, you would need to become a retro commissioning service provider, and there's an application for that. One of the other things that's important for what we're doing with Energy Smart that touches on creating a culture of sustainability in the city is specifically in workforce development. Some of you all are familiar with a series of webinars that we helped to facilitate in September that was called Green Tech Month. Green Tech Month was a partnership between the Louisiana chapter of the U.S. Green Building Council, along with Energy Smart, and also the Urban League of Louisiana, where we held 5 webinars which touted clean energy jobs. And so the attendees that tuned in were students and job seekers, professionals looking to change careers, and they got to hear firsthand from folks like Camille and others, and Jeff Canton and some folks we have online here, but folks from nationally and locally on what's the advice? What do I really need to do to be able to enter the clean energy workforce in energy efficiency, whether it's residential or commercial, or in solar energy or in wind energy. This is something that we hope to grow. If this is a topic that interests you, you're going to see my contact information at the end of this slide. And I hope to keep in touch with you. This is, we did an inaugural run at this September. And we hope that when human beings meet together in person again in the distant future, that we'll be able to do this, and that webinars would be in addition to the in-person event. So that was, we considered that a big success, and we hope to grow that. I want to make sure that this is known for everyone as well. Energy Smart offers training to all of our trade allies, and I would like to welcome everyone on this call to be able to attend 2 of the upcoming trainings that we're going to have. We're going to have a gentleman named Jerry Eaton. He's an engineer who's won several awards from Wisconsin for his work, both as a working professional in energy efficiency, but also as an instructor. He's going to do a 2-day class. The date says December 8th. It's actually going to be December 8th and 9th. And that will be 3.5 hours each day. This class is free, and I want to make sure that everyone at least knows about that. I can send you the link for it. It's by invite, but this will be on energy management and technology, fundamentals and beyond. This is frankly something where if you're working from home, you can tune into this. There's no commitment to be there from the entire start, from start to end each day. But I hope you guys can tune in if you'd like to find out another national perspective and hearing about trends in energy efficiency. This will be on the first week of December, or I guess December 8th, technically the second week. And then the week after that, we will have a 3.5-hour class on introduction to motors and variable frequency drives. So again, if you're interested in learning about some technology that may be outside of the realm of what you typically do, but it might be under some of your colleagues, or it may be something that you're doing and you just want to hear about some of the latest trends, you can tune into both of those. And this is my information. And just to reiterate this, I would be the first person that you all are in touch with any questions about the financial incentives for helping buildings in the city of New Orleans to reduce electricity. If you have projects outside of New Orleans, but are still in Entergy territory, and thus Entergy Louisiana, I will just put you in touch with a colleague of mine that works on that side of the program. But feel free to reach out to me with any questions on the upcoming training, on workforce development, on new construction incentives, or on renovation incentives, and I'll be happy to tell you, happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much for that, Kevin. That was a lot of very valuable information. And just for the attendees, if you can drop in the links to those events, that'd be really useful. So now up next, we have Jeff Gutten from Solar Alternatives. Jeff, please take it away.
Make sure y'all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. So, in the solar business, you get asked to do some pretty strange things. We got Tesla contacted us a few months ago, right after Laura, and offered to deploy some packaged solar systems off into the cow fields of Carencro, Louisiana. So we are back out there today to redeploy him after the second hurricane hit. So it's doing a webinar from a remote location today. So just to give you an idea of the versatility of new energy technologies. What I feel like I'm gonna talk on solar, a little bit on efficiency, but I'm going to focus on my area of expertise here and try to catch everybody up. I know I've talked to many of you before on where solar's at. Things change a little bit every year, so it's kind of interesting for me to reach out and help everyone see what's changed over time, and what, you know, just as you see opportunities to integrate these technologies, it helps us achieve these goals from that the AIA 2030 has. And it for me, I know with the solar installations we do and the projects we take on, whether it's microgrids or battery, solar, water heat, whatever the technology is that's being applied to generate energy from sunlight, I always try to keep ahead of the next technology or the next tools to make them work better. And so I try to present to you the tools that you can use to better build a building, you know, and the processes that we've worked with others on buildings that the process that makes it easiest for you. So I'll jump into it. You know, the most recent change that I think people would be interested in, solar roof, is something that has been a concept and for many years. Several companies have tried to push that out, and it is actually something that is hitting the ground in our area sooner than later. We're doing a few test facilities right now. We did a one for a utility in Mississippi and a few other locations. And this is something, it probably needs its own webinar, really, because it's a fairly, obviously it's well integrated into buildings, and the newest buildings are going to do the best with them because you can design around it. But really cool technology. It is something that has a lot of quirks, but can solve issues that some of us have had architecturally with traditional panels. But you know, what are we talking about when we say solar on buildings or efficiency and reducing waste? You know, we're designing our buildings around being able to have some self-sufficiency from an energy point of view, whether that means the ability to withstand a grid outage or not. It's able to generate its own energy. So the solar, when I got into this 14 years ago, was really something that still a lot of custom components. I would say the biggest change in that time has been standardization of the equipment to where you're talking much more similar to a mechanical industry where you have tonnage of units and standardized design processes. So right now we're also looking at historically low costs, some incentives, even though, you know, we hear about incentives going away. Most of the incentives are doing is kind of ratcheting down along with lower costs. So you still have some really good incentives depending on what your projects are trying to accomplish and where they are. We did cross a threshold, I believe it was 2019, of over 1 million solar installations in the country, which I think was pretty cool. It's kind of amazing to think that happened, but it did. So great, congratulations to us. And then I'll talk for a little bit about the process that we use on the design side. So if you're putting facilities together, if you're starting to think about how you have a net zero facility or how you get the energy usage down, you're obviously doing some efficiency measures in there. And so at some point we'll talk about how you fit those in with the solar. Just to run through it, if anybody isn't as familiar with the different solar technologies, everybody knows about the photovoltaic technologies, which are the shiny panels on a roof that generate electricity. Battery systems are becoming much more integrated with solar systems. I would say over half of the solar systems we do today, especially after a season of 7 hurricanes, have integrated energy storage. So you have a battery system either to operate a business like the one above us, above the text here is St. Bernard Project's building, SBP, over on off of Orleans and Broad on St. Peter. And that's an integrated solar grid and battery system all together. And those are becoming very popular. Water heaters that's probably the oldest solar technology out there. And under that blanket of solar thermal is also pool heating. So if you're in a facility that you're trying to figure out how to get the energy usage down, maybe it's got electric water heat, solar water heat's actually still a very competitive replacement for that. Pool heating is something where if you know you've got a facility like a gym, or a lot of military uses pool heaters. So those technologies are still out there. Think about them early on. Tap somebody like me, like another company that deals with these technologies, and get them to give you the latest on what's out there. And then obviously any other applications, parking lots or ventilation needs have specific applications that are solar integrated. So it doesn't just have to be, gee, where can I put this rooftop full of panels? It can be much more nuanced, integrated, or different technologies. Photovoltaics, again, the look is fairly familiar with folks. When you're talking about a commercial facility, start thinking ahead. You know, what areas am I going to allow for that technology? How am I going to try to match, as we did with SPP, try to match the energy usage with the energy generation? You know, or what part of this facility am I going to try to target the energy usage? Am I going to say this offsets all the cooling in the building? You know, the actual integration, you know, we talked the rooftop, we talked, well, we'll actually see a ground mount system in a few slides later, but the particular location and placement where you're actually harvesting all this sunlight can vary enormously if you take a little bit of time to look for other solutions. Obviously, some have a different price point than others, but there's a great set of options to balance price and functionality and appearance with the performance and the energy generation and the cost that you're looking for. So it's a real balancing measure. A lot of times it's iterative. You go through a few options, just like the regular design process, and you hit the sweet spot of production, appearance, and price. Generally combined with PV is battery technology. What you can see on the bottom of the screen, there's this sort of little Apollo landing looking dude that's actually a battery, a climate controlled battery unit from Dynapower, full of Samsung batteries. And on the rooftop is a SunPower Systems, brand names, but they're well-known technologists. And those came together to form a microgrid that actually creates this. This is done with SQ Dumas Ripple actually on the net zero facility, microgrid. Entergy did give some funding for it, so great for them to participate. Scott will have to see if he can squeeze a vehicle charger out of them for them. But the net result is a demonstration of how these technologies work together to help what is a mixed income community. I think it's veterans mixed income community be resilient in a time of, you know, grid outages, storms, utility bills that people want to be able to manage themselves. And climate, I mean, can't forget climate change. It's a driver for why we're trying these out. As Camille pointed out, it's you know, it's the reason we're making the effort. Water heating, great technology. You do have to be able to think about plumbing and some particular design questions there. I know we were working on some facilities on the design side that were apartment complexes going up in the CBD that said, let's just make, you know, a common hot water system and feed them with an array that matches the, you know, generally aim for 75-80% of the water heat in the facility. And you just add the collectors up, get your storage right, get your plumbing right, and a backup source, and you have your domestic water in the building is solar heated. Pool heating is very similar. It's not as well known, but it does work very well for extending seasons. If you're dealing with a facility that has heating needs that are seasonal, it's a good fit as well under the umbrella of thermal. I would say out of everything, don't wait until you're very far along in the process to reach out to somebody on the design side and just get a first pass. Hey, we're looking at this building. What would be some options? Is there anything we should think about going in? We do talk about solar ready. The same thing, you wouldn't wait to the end of the design to start asking somebody about, you know, making the building efficient, you know, starting integrating those ideas early on. If we talk about making a building solar ready, I've been pushing this idea for a long time, and we're actually trying to get it closer to being a code, just like we would say electric vehicle ready, have a buildings be solar ready. But contiguous roof space, don't just let the mechanic guy figure out where to put everything on the roof. Set some space aside specifically, try to put it on the north side or put it in the center of the roof to where you set aside areas for solar. Southern roofs, obviously where you get the most sunlight, or westerly roofs get the best energy. if you're going to have a set aside for like a mechanical area, electrical for equipment, you'll need a little bit more electrical equipment, especially if you're going to do an energy storage. So be thinking about square footage and where those go. And then, you know, everything else to do with making the energy system more productive, you know, so reducing shading and increasing the ease of the installation. I would say from a design point of view, if we're talking about reducing waste, if we're talking about making buildings that are really future-proofed and climate aware, having an energy model for your building isn't terribly hard to do. You can get an energy use intensity pretty easily. Compare that to a solar model, right? And a solar model, I'll share. Let me see if I can do this without making too much mayhem. I'm going to share one more screen that is let's see, a solar simulation. And so the solar simulation is, we put together a model of the building that you're considering either putting together or already have. And when you design the solar, you can actually model out that exact system, all of its design parameters, and get readings on its efficiencies and how much energy it's going to generate over the course of the year with a pretty good accuracy. So I would say don't wait till the very end to run those numbers and get a sense of what your energy usage is, or your energy generation is to match your energy usage. It really is a great way to see if you fit. What's your percentage? Are you at 30%, 80% of your energy needs? Incentives are important to remember if you're talking about, oh, it's too expensive for my project. There really are good incentives still. You can still depreciate 80%, 85% of a system cost in the first year. Actually, I want to say that's up to 89% as of next year when the tax credit goes to 22%. So we've got another year, 2021 is 22%. You know, it's assuming the new administration doesn't, you know, at least stabilize the credits for a few years. They could bump them back up a little, but likely they're just going to hold them there for a while. And rural grants. I mean, it won't help you in New Orleans, but pretty quickly outside of New Orleans, North Shore especially, you run into the ability to take a 25% USDA, it's called a REAP grant, Rural Energy for America program. Great incentives. Let all these pieces come together to add solar to, maybe it's not every project, but it's going to be every now and then you're going to be able to add that. But efficiency should always be, you know, part of the equation. So last throw out there, if you end up with facilities that are not a good fit, ground installations are relatively straightforward. You can actually get some really good cost points on larger ones. Or some facilities, we're talking to distributors out in West Louisiana right now, one that wants to put up a megawatt system because they're tired of paying their utility bills. They want to be able to run their own power. So this is their solution because they don't want to put it on a rooftop. So contact information right there if you need me for anything. If you're just looking for some advice on facilities, we help a lot of folks just talk through ideas, and it's kind of fun. So I'm glad to help at any time.
Thank you for that presentation, Jeff. That was really valuable information and really thorough. And if you do have any questions for any of the attendees, feel free to use the Q&A section, and the panelists will try to answer some questions, and we'll also have a section where we'll take the conversation a little further. And next up, last but not least, we have Amanda Sesser from 21 Sustainability. So please take it away.
Thanks, Javi. Let me go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, well, thanks for inviting me to present today. It's really been a wonderful symposium so far. I've been really impressed with all the different topics that everyone's covered. And I've been invited to scale up now. So we've been talking a lot today about very, very local incentives and projects and on the ground implementation. And I just want to take us back up a few scales to the regional and global arena to see, you know, what are some of the multilateral agreements and incentives for doing this kind of sustainability work at the very large scale. So I just wanted to first just touch on my background, because I'm coming at this from a different perspective from a lot of you. I'm not from the architectural or design field. I'm actually a climate scientist. And I started my career, I have about 20 years of climate impact research and modeling experience. And I began as a researcher looking at climate impacts on ecosystems and carbon dynamics across the globe, starting in the Amazon and tropical Andes, and later working at polar latitudes and so forth. And then in the last 10 years or so, I've switched from being primarily focused on research to working with decision makers and policymakers to what do you do about climate change, not just creating data around that. So a lot of the work that I do is translating research so that it's policy relevant, but mostly it's working with governments or communities or sometimes a corporation to go beyond what we often call analysis paralysis of like, okay, I know that change is happening. I know I should be concerned, but I don't even know where to start. That's a really common place for like, just not just us locally here in New Orleans or even across the country, but globally as a community, we find ourselves in this place of where we even start. So that's what I focus on. And I wanted to bring to your attention just some of these multilateral agreements or global level agreements among governments that are driving a lot of the global conversation these days around climate change or global change issues in general. And the first one is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You hear them referred to a lot as the SDGs. Sorry, I have my acronym there wrong, the SDGs. So if someone's in passing says something about SDGs, that's what this is talking about. It's from the United Nations. Each signatory to the United Nations is responsible for coming up with their own nationally determined contribution. So there's not an overarching, thou shalt do this by certain date. Each country has to come up with its own goals on its own. There's a emphasis on equity in general, but gender equity is called out in particular. And this will make sense here more in a minute. This idea of entry points. It's not the boxes that count, but the arrows in between the boxes. So let me I'm going to go to the next slide and I'm going to come back here. But I just wanted to show you, this is what the boxes refer to. Each one of these boxes is a goal that makes up the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's 17 in total. And you can see that a lot of these, they cover everything from poverty and hunger to peace and justice, life below water, life on land, climate action. So there's a lot of different, there's pretty much everything you can think of inside of these goals. But you can find yourself, I'm sure, in multiple goals: clean water and sanitation, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, for instance, affordable and clean energy. You will see that number 5 is the gender equality that I mentioned. So to go back to the slide, with the what we're finding is that it's kind of unsurmountable for a country to say, okay, this is what I'm doing for all of these goals, and it's been pretty difficult to implement. So this idea of entry points, where we can get started, and again, that's where the global conversation is like, okay, this is all great, but how do we get going, and how do we move past the phase where we're just talking about it and planning for it? So entry points include human well-being, sustainable economies, decarbonization, food and nutrition, urban development, and global commons. Some other notable multilateral agreements that I just want to mention, you can just Google these and find that all the information is online. I think we're mostly familiar with the 2016 Paris Agreement that the U.S. has pulled out of, but I would bet anything that the new administration gets us back into the Paris Accord. And that's really focusing on greenhouse gas emissions and mitigation. A little bit about adaptation as well. but really strongly on the mitigation side. There's the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which is a mouthful. It's most commonly referred to as IPBES. And IPBES has also, like the SDGs, it has IG targets, and which are measurable goals around biodiversity and ecosystem services. Another notable global effort is ICLEI, which is Global Local Governments for Sustainability. It also contains the Sustainable Cities Initiative. I've worked with ICLEI on some of the mega cities in the south of the Western Hemisphere, so Sao Paulo, Santiago, and Buenos Aires, working on their sustainability and climate adaptation plans. But ICLEI has really taken a leadership role, especially in the last 4 years in the United States, as the federal government took a back seat in a lot of the global climate change conversations. A lot of the cities and mayors really stepped up and said, okay, well, we're gonna take it from here. And as Camille mentioned earlier, the C4's Cities and Climate Leadership Group is a conglomerate of 96 cities around the globe, and New Orleans is an innovator city among that network. I do think it's worth mentioning, here's an article that was published in The Guardian in September of this year, and here's the headline: World fails to meet a single target to stop destruction of nature, the UN report. So this is referring to the IG targets that I mentioned through the IPBES platform. And globally, you know, we haven't reached a single one of those targets. And likewise, the Sustainable Development Goals, you could have an article that says the same thing. And it's one of these things where it's these really high level conversations, they sound good, but when it comes to the implementation, people are either floundering because of lack of financial support or just lack of knowing where to get started. So I wanted to have a slide here focusing on what is working at the global level. And one of the things that I think deserves a little bit more conversation, and we don't have time for it today, maybe in the panel discussion, is this idea of mitigation versus adaptation. And everything that we've heard about today, or most of what we've heard about today, is really focusing on the mitigation side. So we've heard a lot about energy vehicles and solar panels, and a lot of really great ways to make energy efficient buildings. That's on the mitigation. So you're trying to stop the rise or slow the rise of greenhouse gases. And adaptation is, on the other hand, where you're saying, okay, well, these changes are happening, and they're happening regardless. Even if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions today, we're still going to see decades worth of change. So what are we going to do about those changes? And I should have put one more category, which is transformation, which is actually directing that change rather than just allowing it to happen and adapting to it. How do you become part of the driver's seat? Another thing that's really working at the global level is this idea of transdisciplinarity, and that's compared to interdisciplinarity. I know that's kind of jargony, but transdisciplinarity is when you have the affected stakeholders as part of the decision-making process from problem definition all the way through implementation. And I know in day 3, a lot of the speakers spoke to that and said, you know, whether they were working with tribal communities or you know, like City of New Orleans, for instance, that listening to people that are affected by these issues, and not only just listening, but having them involved at every step of the way is working. Another thing that I've had personal success with is something that's called the RAD framework. RAD stands for resist, accept, and direct. So you work with decision makers to outline what are all of, like, basically what is my entire decision space along these lines of resist, accept, and direct. And resist can be things like building seawalls to keep sea level rise at bay or to keep storm surge at bay. Accept could be like what we're doing on Dauphin Island, where we're saying, in Dauphin Island, Alabama, where we're saying, you know, part of this barrier island is just going to be underwater. So we're just going to move infrastructure to a different part of the island. That's accepting. And then directing would be something, along the lines of building canals, or even like moving species around the landscape that are better suited for the current climate envelope. So there's a lot of different options that go into this, but it gets people out of the I don't even know what my options are, stage, to having lots of options on the table. And then you can go through a stakeholder process to choose what's the best way to go. And then lastly, I'm just going to wrap this up with, the conversation at the global level has really changed from one of equality to one of equity. And when I think of equity, I think more of like justice. So this is a cartoon that many of you have probably seen a lot before, but I think it does a great job explaining what equality is. Equality is everybody gets treated equally, but you can see that the tall person here in this cartoon, gets the same social benefit that the little boy gets, right? And so the little boy still can't see over the fence. But when it comes to equity or justice, the little boy gets two boxes to stand on. So now he can see over the fence, and now all three of them can see over the fence. And another topic that we just can't not mention is that vulnerable communities are impacted more than any other community across the globe. We see it here in New Orleans and in the Southeast, but you see it around the globe, that the people who have the least amount of resources to adapt or to deal with these global changes are also the ones who have the least amount of culpability in creating climate change and some of these issues, but they are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. So we see a new field rising called intersectional environmentalism, or intersectional conservation. And it's where climate change, social justice, and equity issues are all treated as the same thing, that you cannot have a solution that's focused on justice and a solution that's focused on climate change separately, that they need to be intertwined. So I know I went pretty fast, but trying to make sure we have time for the panel discussion, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that, Amanda. That was really great, and I think it's a personal triumph, and I know that Kelsey and Terry might echo this, but having Camille at the beginning talk about the New Orleans Sustainability Plan, and then you talk about the SDGs, is something that we've been wanting to kind of curate for a long time. Just kind of how the whole committee went to be, and so seeing it happen in one single event, it's giving me great joy. So up next, we're going to have a presentation by our major sponsor, Woodworks, and after that, we will move on with the panel discussion. So.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Peters. I am the Southeast Regional Director here at Woodworks. I just want to thank all of you for allowing us to be the event sponsor this year at the Rising Symposium. Today, I'm going to spend just a little bit of time telling you a little bit about our team and what Woodworks is doing for the industry right now, so that we can all work towards a more sustainable built environment and reducing our carbon footprint, as well as sequestering a tremendous amount of carbon when we look at, say, light frame, heavy timber, and mass timber wood structures. Before I get into the presentation, I just want to give a special thanks to our funding partners, the Softwood Lumber Board, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, their Forestry Services team, and then a group called Forestry Innovation Investments. In addition to these funding partners, we have board level partners, we have market development partners, as well as affiliate partners. Each one of these members, they help support our organization so that we can continue to provide project support and education to the design community all across the country. So thank you very much to all of them. So what we're doing here at Woodworks is we're looking for opportunities like perhaps what you see on the left here, buildings that are traditionally been designed out of very carbon intensive materials. And we're working hand in hand with the design community to help them understand a code compliant way to start moving towards these buildings like you see here on the right, something that is very less carbon intensive. Will significantly reduce our carbon footprint and actually sequester a tremendous amount of carbon. And we understand not everybody are experts in this particular world. So we're here to walk you through each step of the phase to help you start moving towards more of a sustainable design. And so how do we work with the design community to help all of you kind of achieve this end goal? So number one, first and foremost, we provide project support. We are here at Woodworks where we either have a background as an engineer, an architect, or somebody who has been in the building industry for most of their career. So we have a massive skill set of individuals that are here to help support you on everything from schematic design all the way to helping your contractor achieve their certificate of occupancy on the project. So we have many, many different strategies that we can use and different support methods. So I encourage you to work with us on any of your current projects. And so as I get into the presentation, we're going to start talking a little bit about mass timber. Now, Woodworks definitely provides support in the world of light frame and multifamily construction, but we're seeing this huge increase in interest for mass timber. So I want to touch a little bit about that today because it can work as a massive carbon dump. It can sequester a tremendous amount of carbon. And so one of the misconceptions we see is that mass timber projects are only really, out in the Pacific Northwest, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So right here, you can see these are projects that we're aware of that we provided assistance on. And the first number that you'll see, I broke out Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. That first number is our projects that are under construction or have already been built. That second number are projects that we know of that are currently in the design phase. So you can see there is no shortage of projects on the East Coast. So it's not something that's just happening out in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to give you a quick mass timber overview as far as what products are available in the market to help you when you're looking at these sustainable designs. Now we have glue laminated timber, which is the oldest engineered wood product out in the market, used for columns and beams, and even can use them as plate elements too. But traditionally the glue lam is part of our post and beam structure when using, say, a cross laminated timber floor plate. That moves us into CLT. Now that is dimensional lumber that's oriented orthogonal to one another, and they're created in 3, 5, 7, and 9 ply panels, all the way from 8 to 10 feet in height and all the way up to 64 feet in length. Use those as plate elements for your floor, your roof, as well as walls, should you desire to do that as well. Nail laminated timber, or NLT, is dimensional lumber that's face nailed together to create large billets or panel products, if you will. Dowel laminated timber, or DLT, uses softwood base material. They pre-drill a hole into that base material and pressure inject a hardwood dowel that has a moisture content that is less than the base material. Over time, that wicks that moisture out of the base material, expands, and mechanically locks everything together. So you have no glue or anything like that, a completely green product available. We have mass plywood panels, or MPP, which is another form of CLT. It is a structural composite lumber version where they use veneers instead of dimensional lumber. And those come in 1-inch increments all the way up to 24 inches thick. So mass plywood panels, those can actually be fabricated to create columns and beams as well. And finally, we have lumber decking. So that kind of falls in the middle of it. Is it mass timber? Is it heavy timber? But we've seen them work really well on post and beam structures with lumber decking roof panels and things like that. So where is mass timber in our current code? So right now, when we're talking about how can we impact our carbon footprint, how can we sequester carbon? Right now in our current codes, in a residential application, we can get up to about 5 stories, and then we can even add a mezzanine in there. We can get some pretty good size. In an office building, about 6 stories, right? So we're somewhere in that 360,000 square feet to, say, 500,000 square foot range. So big opportunities to really go from traditional carbon intensive materials to something that is more user friendly, correct? And so in the future version of the code, the 2021 IBC, we actually introduced 3 new construction types. a 4C, a 4B, and a 4A, which will allow us to go 9 stories, 12 stories, and 18 stories respectively. Now we can talk about this at another time, but this is just a very quick snapshot of where we're going. We're going to be able to achieve buildings that are 972,000 square feet. So massive opportunities to really look at introducing more mass timber into the industry. Now, in terms of applications, a couple of little project examples here. Here you can see a great glulam post and beam structure. On this particular project, they used nail laminated timber for the floor and roof plates. And so what's really beautiful about this building is this is the finished product here. When a client comes in here into some office space, that's what they get to build out if they choose to. But the beauty of really keeping this exposed is what's attractive. Here is a CLT, we have a glulam post system with CLT floor plates. Notice there's no beams or girders because CLT has strength in both directions. It does allow you to point support it. So there's another opportunity there. You can use CLT, as I said, for not only your floors and roofs, but wall panels as well. And you can even use it in a hybrid approach where you use light frame construction walls and CLT floor and roof plates. Always recommend prefabricating your wall panels. CLT goes in very quickly, so you do not want your field crew trying to frame the walls and chase the floor. So just something to think about. And then even even more of a traditional hybrid approach where we have a steel with CLT floor plates. And so some of the things that we're doing here is we created the Wood Innovation Network to really help expand your knowledge of mass timber. I'd encourage you to reach out to me and give you all the details on the Wood Innovation Network, but it allows you to interact with design professionals who have already designed these buildings, allows you to see their projects, connect with them, network with them, look at all the other projects they've designed, see who the design teams were, the contractors were. Really great tool for you to use. We also have multiple resources on our website, Carbon Calculator, that will give you a tangible output in terms of the carbon saved by taking X amount of passenger vehicles off the road each year, or enough energy to power a single family home. We have mass timber checklists. We have fire resistance checklists, things to really just help increase your knowledge on how to work with timber. And then manufacturing partner contacts. If you may not know who to contact, we have the resources for you. And then just some market success. Here's a project that I worked on in Tampa where the building official wasn't very familiar with light frame construction. I was able to walk them through a 5-story light frame code path, and eventually this project moved forward. So we're talking about a 775,000 square foot project that was able to move forward. And then Florida's first mass timber building in Claremont. This was an architect, an engineer, contractor, had no mass timber experience. We worked with them to complete this beautiful 3-story, 29,000 square foot mass timber project. So that's just a little bit of what we can do here at Woodworks. So once again, thank you for allowing me to have this time with you this afternoon. I'd love to hear from you. Here is my contact information, and please feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the symposium.
All right, and thank you again to Woodworks for that awesome presentation. I can't think of any more fitting sponsor than them. That was incredibly informative. So yeah, without further ado, we should start the conversation now with the panelists. If you guys can unmute your mics and share your cameras, that would be great. All right, and to kind of guide us through this conversation, we have Drew Lamb. So Drew, take it away.
For having me on. I'm obviously not an expert like these guys are, but I was invited to participate as a representative for USGBC Louisiana. We hope to be doing some more collaboration with AIA throughout the next couple of years, especially on topics like this. I did want to point out real fast that USGBC/GBCI has a lot of different rating systems that can help you with these types of situations and problems in your projects. And one thing I want to touch on real fast is that I know rating systems are often difficult to sell to clients in Louisiana. That's not important to a lot of clients, or it's too expensive, or things like that. what I would suggest is using these rating systems as a tool, as a checklist, as a goal, something that you can use to move yourself and your firm a step further in this process of lowering carbon emissions and energy use and things like that. And if you can get one project to check off 5 things on a lead list, then maybe the next project can check off 6 or something along those lines. So use USGBC and GBCI as a tool and let us know what you would like to see from us in the future. That being said, on to the panel questions. I'm going to start with equity. It's a big word with a lot of meaning behind it and a lot of weight, we'll say. What does equity look like to you in your realm, and how is it manifested in your profession and your networks? And I do want to start with Amanda, since she has a bit more of this global view around it, and then maybe we can move it to the more local aspect.
Sure, thanks, Drew. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the $60 million question, right? That we're all grappling with is, I showed that cartoon at the end of my presentation that, defined what equity is compared to equality, for instance. But what does that look like in the implementation, in the implementation realm is something that I think we're all trying to figure out, again, as a global community, as well as a local community. And, empowering underrepresented groups is the first and foremost place where people are starting with that. So whether it's looking at empowering women and girls, or people of color or indigenous communities, making sure that the power dynamics are at least acknowledged, if not adjusted, so that people do have I feel like they have a stake in the process and are able to be part of the decision making, and not just, like historically or even currently in some cases are just completely left out. But then when you add in these historically underrepresented groups into the conversation, a lot of times they feel like, oh, well, I don't have the expertise. And here's these, PhD researchers or these big corporations and they're experts and I'm not, and so I'm just going to sit here and be quiet. So finding ways to elevate all of those voices, making sure that they're part of, like I said, the problem framing itself. I think that one of the disconnects that we see is that, we have researchers and we have, just different industries that are, we're doing our own problem framing in isolation. And a lot of times we're working on problems that aren't even relevant to real world applications. And that's where the science policy gap exists.
Okay, thank you. Maybe someone local now, Camille, or?
Sorry, Drew, do you have a earphones or a mic? You're kind of going in and out a little bit.
Well, Camille, do you want to go ahead and chime in?
Yeah, so just, you'd like me to speak about equity in general and connecting it with sustainability?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, sorry about that. Camille, you want to go ahead and share your views on this?
Sure. I think, one of the lessons of the Climate Action Equity Project, which is what I talked about before, is that you really need to make sure you are going and talking to the people who are living with the challenges of climate change. So going out into the neighborhoods as we did and have community listening sessions and asking them, what is the most important issue for you? I think, oftentimes when we're in these professional circles, we get caught up in jargon and technical terms, and it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that the people who are bearing the brunt of these impacts are often low-income families, often people of color, often people who don't have a lot of letters after their names like we might. And so if we really are serious about incorporating solutions for those communities into our priorities and recommendations, then we need to be with those communities and talking to them and listening to them.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in. That's something that I wrestle with a lot of. I often ask myself, is the amount of information that I'm learning, and as I get more certifications and I get more familiar with all these technicalities of sustainability, am I moving myself away from the people that are affected the most? Am I becoming unrelatable? And that's often try to keep presence and humility to the world of design and the things that I do. And Kevin, we had a conversation yesterday about how do you engage the communities to talk to them about the alternatives for sustainability and energy, kind of renewable models. Can you speak a little bit about your work in like community outreach?
Sure. As far as Energy Smart goes, tomorrow's an example, or last Thursday is an example. We carve out time to go to parts of town and introduce ourselves to small business owners who probably otherwise would never have been reached by social media campaigns that we do, or the other advertising campaigns. So we lead with kits. We lead with small business kits that have LED light bulbs, faucet aerators, and some other conversation starters that we can go in with and kind of get over that this is not too good to be true. And once last week I spent about 3 or 4 hours walking around one specific corridor here in New Orleans. It was on Broad Street, and you just end up going into a barbershop and health clinics and dentists and small t-shirt shop. And these are just folks who are not going to find that message unless you're approaching them individually. So we just make the time to do that, but it pays dividends because you develop a relationship, and I love it. That's probably the part of this job that I enjoy the most, is when I get to go and make introductions on an individual basis, because once you help them immediately, they feel like it's kind of like what Amanda was just saying, or both of you guys, that there's the disconnect that everybody wants to be a part of these solutions, but they need some sort of starting place, and they need to feel like they are a part of this game too. And so we lead with these kits that allows everyone to feel, once that handoff is made with these kits and they have their own story to tell, and then that word spreads to another business owner, then they're in the mix. That's their toes are now in the water. And then that they feel like, all right, I've made this one switch, of the simple switch of unscrewing the faucet aerator or the light bulb. And now we get to talk to them about the rest of their business. And then we can lead them into all the discussions and everything else in energy efficiency and renewables. And, it's a small community here. We can talk about a lot of different things, and waste reduction and other things. But of course, obviously for my day job here, we talk about energy efficiency, but that's how we do it. It's knocking on doors and introducing ourselves. For a long time, we were not allowed to do that because of COVID, but we take our precautions, and we're making sure to do that now.
Great, thank you. In New Orleans, as in other older cities, we have a lot of older buildings, historical buildings that may have completely outrun their course as the buildings that were meant to be. And along those same lines, in this post-COVID world that we're going to be dealing with, empty office spaces, a lot of empty buildings eating up carbon emissions just by sitting there. What are some how do we approach these challenges? What are some ideas behind what to do with these buildings, or how do we deal with this problem we're going to have?
Well, I'd like to pipe up and just say, as much as a catastrophe this may be for the commercial real estate market, this is a fantastic opportunity for energy efficiency upgrades, as well as improving indoor air quality, not to mention green jobs training. So there's a lot of really horrific things that COVID is wreaking upon our society. But if we look at some of the silver lining, we do have the ability to create opportunity from some of these challenges. So if we can create a green workforce that's actually trained in these high-paying jobs to go in and retrofit buildings for energy efficiency upgrades, we're actually going to see improved indoor air quality, which is, of course, one of the biggest determining factors of respiratory health. And so thus we're making people safe from future COVID infections. So there's a lot of opportunity upon opportunity if we layer it that way. But that, of course, takes a lot of money. So those are the types of programs that we can be thinking about in terms of anticipating some of the federal dollars that are likely to be coming from Washington post-January.
Camille, along with that, as you were speaking about the New Orleans Energy Challenge and speaking about that, the upgrades obviously come with a lot of funding and require a lot of monetary resources. I was wondering what it would take to adopt a citywide policy of updating our energy code. If we have this energy policy of starting to track how our buildings are performing, do we have a space to bring up energy code? And on the effect of cost and equity, is that, how are we weighing the benefit of energy efficiency to making it accessible or a barrier to entry for people to be able to do retrofits if we update the code?
Yeah, I kind of think they're almost two separate issues, because if we can look at updating the code for new construction, I think that's a doable thing. I think we have enough architects and design firms in this city who know how to do the right thing and have been doing the right thing for a long time. And so, you know, there's a lot of people that are building above code in New Orleans. It's just not it's not the norm yet. And so if we have a policy coupled with training and potentially put in place some level of incentives, even if it's not monetary, even if it's, you know, you get faster permitting, things like that. Those are some ways that we can start to have a conversation about improving the codes. I think it absolutely can be done. And, you know, the retrofit is a separate issue, because really we have to take advantage of some of the funding that's available through Kevin's program and Energy Smart. And then there's going to be, I believe there's going to be a lot more low income weatherization program funding coming from the Biden administration. And that's a huge opportunity.
I have a question for either Scott or Kevin. I wanted, as an architect, I'm very interested to know, you know, what's going to happen with kind of historic buildings and historic preservation. You know, if these buildings are going to have to be kind of retrofitted to fit new kind of ways of being powered, or even being resilient against, you know, all this, the threats of climate change. Have you guys found any challenges working with historic buildings or historic districts in the projects that you guys do?
I'll start off. Personally, I haven't come across anything yet, but it's something that we're looking at. As you can imagine, the demand for electricity, especially in my area, electrification is increasing. With that comes some pretty large equipment, whether it's transformers, to make sure that we can provide that power at the right voltage to meet that outcome. It's something that we considered, and you know, I think I've come across a couple problems with customers where the right size transformer wasn't going to fit on the historic property, so it caused us to rescope the project. Or reshift it to somewhere else. But yeah, it is going to be a factor, because you're going from, like in my role, the transportation, fueling the vehicle off-site perhaps, to now the fuel for that vehicle is on-site through electricity. So the upgraded switch boxes, the panels, the transformers are all going to play a factor into how you're going to design that in the future.
So in the interest of time, we'll open it up to you guys and let us know if there were a few questions in the Q&A that got answered through the system that you're welcome to check out. Here's one. Camille, do you know of any cities with best practices for those incentive-based code options for higher performing spaces?
Not off the top of my head, no, but there's some great resources that are available through C40. They kind of have like a best practices library, and there's a few other organizations like American Council on an Energy Efficient Economy. They have a lot of free resources where they can tell you different best practices for codes and policies. And also ICLEI has similar resources. I think Amanda might have mentioned ICLEI, ICLEI.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a question for Jeffrey, if you're still on. I was very interested in your presentation when you share the kind of solar roofs. They kind of almost blended as kind of like terracotta panels. Is that something that is viable for a facade application, a vertical wall application?
Tesla did, and can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Tesla did indicate that the panels, the tiles themselves can, they can go from a 2/12 to a 20/12 pitch. So you can kind of get to a near vertical with them. Their challenge is they currently only have a flashing system that's up to a 12/12. So I think, I would say within a reasonable amount of time, they're going to have a solution for the flashing part of the system to get it up to a near vertical. I would say keep in touch on that. If there's a specific application that somebody's thinking of that could be there, it's kind of why you got to check back on those technologies every now and then and see, have they met this need yet? Have they filled that gap? And I did want to touch on, you mentioned there was a question about historic application of efficient and new technologies, generation technologies to historic buildings. And I think that's again another evolving challenge, where you've got, we're just getting these solar tiles, are they okay for this HOA, but not this historic group? Maybe there's a variation that will come out in the future that will be. So I think we're, being something that's visibly added to the facility, we're always very sensitive on that. And I think that's something that, every technology has that analysis of, okay, how do we do this in a historically sensitive way on those facilities?
Does anyone would like to come off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, if any of the attendees, you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat section or in the Q&A section below. Let's see what I have.
All right, we got another one for Amanda. Your presentation was great and depressing. For us as attendees, who would we be talking to in our networks to make people aware of the challenges? Who are we not reaching?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if I knew that, then I would probably be on it, right? Like, it's kind of the point where we are right now in the development of implementing some of these larger frameworks and reaching some of these goals. But, like the way that these multilateral agreements work that, are from the United Nations or from even groups like the Belmont Forum or Future Earth or the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, there's a lot of different regional as well as global organizations that are working at this like global diplomatic level. And, then it comes to each country to say, how are they going to meet those goals, right? But then how's a single administration going to say, oh, this is how we're going to do that when it takes all of us? And that's why I think kind of going from Camille's presentation to mine, just in this session of the symposium, really shows how the different levels are interconnected. So it takes everyone working at the city level and at the state level in order to roll that up to a national level response. I think that's where the communication breakdowns are occurring is, you know, a lot of the government agencies that I work for don't even know about the SDGs here in the U.S., you know, and they're the ones that would be carrying out some of the work to meet a lot of those targets. And they're not even aware of that because they're just working on their normal day-to-day jobs like they have been for the last few decades, and they're not thinking about how their work scales up at the global level. So I think that what we need to target is, you know, there's education and awareness of how local actions, a lot of the things that Camille described that is happening in New Orleans, that Scott and Kevin and everybody today talked about with like the Entergy and the energy efficiencies and solar panels and so forth. How is that scaling up to meet global greenhouse goals, or working on making a more sustainable or resilient global community? You know, it's tough because you're trying to scale up the work that a lot of different people are doing. But I think the important caveat to that, or the counterpoint, I guess I should say, because it seems gloom and doom, but the counterpoint is that so many people are doing so many amazing things at the local level or regional level. And so it's just connecting the dots, getting the right people together, and starting to find metrics that can actually measure those on the ground, the work that's already happening, the really good work that's already happening on the ground, so that it can contribute to some of these larger goals and frameworks.
Yeah, that was well put. We have one last question from Z Smith, expressing how much he misses you, Camille. And he's asking, who's taking on the roles and tasks you advanced for the city of New Orleans?
Oh, Steve, I miss you too. I miss all of you. My understanding is that because of the budget challenges that the city of New Orleans has and most municipalities are facing at the moment, they are not currently planning on replacing my position. However, they have moved around some people internally so that there might be some capacity to advance some of the work.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think we're coming to a close. We do want to thank again all of sponsors: Woodworks, Nano Architecture, Huseman Engineering Consultants, and Escadumas Ripple. And we'll have a brief message from Terry Hogendryer, the current president of AI New Orleans, and Julie Babin, the upcoming president of AI New Orleans for 2021.
Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Okay, great. I actually wanted to take this opportunity at the very end to express my gratitude for accomplishing a goal of mine. And I can't express to you enough how much it was a pleasure working with Javier and Kelsey. I'm astounded at the mentors of mine can be so young, which is great. In addition, I really wanted to also put out my heartfelt thanks to Z Smith, Waleed, and everyone else that was on the 2030 committee to get this happen, to make this happen. I'm highly impressed over the fact that we only had 3 people in the city that were members of the AIA 2030 challenge, and now we have like 13, 15 members. That's huge. It makes me want to cry. But more importantly, this is the most important crisis that we have, and as architects and designers, we can fundamentally change this path. And I think it is incumbent upon us and is unethical if we do not do everything we can to make not only the 2030 challenge part of our everyday life in every single project, but actually changing the trajectory of the climate change and the spiraling climate issues we have today, which encapsulate everything. Most importantly at this time, equity and our own other humans that we have to live with and that we have to work with and that we do not protect enough, and we can do something to change that. I'm also eternally grateful because Julie is now going to speak about the fact that she is hoping to continue this path on, but I'll let her speak. And once again, I really want to tell everyone how thankful and grateful I am and how proud AIA New Orleans is, and that we've actually made some pretty much national recognition on doing this that I'm going to send out to everyone. So thank you for all of your participation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Babin. I'm next year's president. Thank you, Terry, and the entire 2030 committee for this wonderfully informative symposium. I've both learned a lot and I really enjoyed it too. As a direct result, my firm, Studio WTA, to signing the 2030 commitment, and we've already drafted our action plan. So we thank you for the boost and encouragement. We really appreciate it. Many years ago, I became a lead AP, and I've led the sustainable projects that roll through our office, but I didn't really put the 2030 commitment under my, something I focused on. So I'm really looking forward to tackling that this year and all the years to come. I'm also a member of the EDI committee, so I can tell you confidently that my presidency will be committed to both climate and equity. I plan to continue this series next year with Kelsey and Terry and Javier serving as the backbone. And I want to thank all the participants, speakers, and panelists. Let's continue this dialogue. Let's create accessible, sustainable design in the New Orleans community. Thank you, everyone.
And with that, that has been our symposium. Thank you, everybody. Be safe and happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you again.